Through interviews, I've gotten every single job and/or officer position that I've applied for. If you want to hear how you can do the same, keep watching this video. Hi guys, it's Alexia. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the bell to be notified every time I post a new video. Before I jump into this subject, I just want to share with you guys some of my credibility, which helps me to give you guys all these tips.
As you guys can see, for only being 17 years old, I have a lot of experience both being interviewed and conducting interviews myself. Make sure to watch till the very end of the video because I'll go through how to nail all these different types of interviews. I'm going to start off with tips that are relevant for all types of interviews.
My first tip for you guys, which will actually really help you calm down your nerves, is to prepare ahead before your internship. So I would recommend getting a Google Doc open and writing down some questions that you think are going to be asked of you and writing down model responses. Obviously, in your interview, you won't have this doc with you, but once you can formulate your ideas, you're more likely to remember them and be able to say them in your interview. For the actual interview itself, dress well, be confident, and be authentic. Confidence is key for interviews because before you expect someone else to give you a position, you have to believe yourself that you deserve that position. Whether the interview is in person or online, make sure that you show up on time or even 5 minutes earlier to show the interviewer that you are a punctual person. So I'm sure that you guys would probably get really nervous, as I did myself on my first interview. So remember that it's okay, and the interviewer likely knows that you're still a kid and you're still learning. My biggest tip for getting rid of nerves is once you're asked a question, to take a deep breath and really think about what you're going to answer before you start rambling on about nonsense. Going off of that point, make sure that you stay focused on the question that you were asked. Try your best to not go off on tangents and answer the question that you were asked directly. At the end of the interview, I highly suggest that you guys ask questions. This is for a few reasons. 1, I'm sure you guys have questions, but don't be afraid to ask them. 2, it can help set you apart from other candidates that aren't speaking up, and it gives you another way to get your name out there. 3, it helps clarify information that wasn't clear from the interview. And 4, it gives you a chance to better connect with the interviewer. Some questions that I like to ask at the end of the interview are more information about the company and the company's values, or just how the interviewer themselves got involved with the company. Alright, now let's move on to the tips for an in-person interview. You probably want to bring a copy of your resume just in case, so you have it for reference during the interview. Once you meet the person who you're going to interview, you want to give them a nice firm handshake to show that you are confident. Next, once you get into the office or the interviewing space, make sure that you sit upright and present yourself well. As you're talking with the person interviewing you, try to maintain eye contact as best as possible. It's much easier to connect with the person interviewing you if you're actually looking directly at them and having a conversation with them, instead of staring off into space or at the wall. I just wanted to reiterate this point, but make sure that you really think before you give your answer. If you misheard the question or you didn't catch it all, it is totally okay to ask the interviewer to repeat the question to make sure that you can give the correct response. Of course, at the end of the interview, make sure that you thoroughly thank the person who is interviewing you. And if you get a business card or a contact email, make sure to email them 1 or 2 days later and just thank them for their time and for giving you an interview. One more tip for in-person interviews. Sometimes, especially for a school position in a club, you might be the only person being interviewed by maybe 15 sitting officers. In this case, as you're answering, try and span across the room and make sure that you're giving everyone a little bit of eye contact at some point. That way more people can connect with you. Especially if it's in school, don't feel nervous, as the people who are interviewing you likely were in the same position that you were in last year. Try your best to take a deep breath and to really ground yourself before you give your responses. Because of COVID-19 going on, I know that some of you guys might have to do virtual interviews, so I have a few tips for that as well. Number 1 is to make sure that your setting is clean and quiet. The last thing you want during your interview is interruptions or a messy background distracting the interviewer. Second, I think this tip is a little bit overlooked, but make sure that you look at the camera during your response. I know that some of you guys might not be used to it, so I would recommend just practicing a little bit beforehand of your interview. That way you're ready to do so once the time comes. My third tip is to try your best to connect with the interviewer, although it is virtual. So I know it's difficult because you're not in the same room and it's just not the same, but try your best to be authentic and to show your true self. That way the interviewer can make a connection with you. Another tip for virtual interviews, I know sometimes people have Wi-Fi that's choppy, but if your interviewer's Wi-Fi gets cut off, it's okay to politely ask them to restate their question. That way you make sure that you understand what they're saying. Now we're going to move on to some of my tips for group interviews and how to make sure that you can stand out among the other candidates. This tip is commonly overlooked, but for us on the interviewing side, it can really set you apart, and it's having some energy and being bubbly. So this is great because even though it's virtual, you can really feel the person's energy and excitement through the screen, and it makes you more likely to remember who they are. When you give your responses on a group interview, you want to make sure to pay attention to how other people are responding. If most kids are only giving 20 to 30-second responses, don't be out here giving a 3-minute life spiel. Try your best to mirror everyone else. That way you won't annoy the interviewers and you won't annoy the other people on the interview as well. To that point, just because your response is short doesn't mean that it can't be impactful. In that same amount of time that most other kids are spending, try and narrow down the information to give the most specific and targeted information about yourself that makes you the best candidate. This works especially well for group interviews, but it's to ask questions at the end of the interview. Because there will be a lot of other kids being interviewed at the same time, if you ask a question at the end, it gives you another chance for one-on-one interaction and for the interviewers to likely remember your name. If the people interviewing you give you their email, try your best to send a thank you email to follow up. This way, it will reinforce your name in their contacts and in their brain, and they're much more likely to remember you and choose you for that position. Alright guys, that is it for all my tips. I really hope that these can be helpful for you guys to help nail your first interview. I know being a kid, it's really difficult and really nerve-wracking to have your first interview, but I promise you guys that it is not as bad as you think. The more you do it, the more you get used to it and the better you will get. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a big thumbs up and make sure that you are subscribed to my channel because I have a lot more content and advice like this on the way. If you know someone that can benefit from these tips, make sure to share this video with them so that way more people can be nailing their interviews. Thank you guys so much for watching and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!